splash echoed across the pristine pool deck like a gunshot. Mia's wheelchair bobbed helplessly in the chlorinated water as her 7-year-old body thrashed in panic. Karen's manicured finger was still pointing accusingly when the first siren wailed in the distance, because what she didn't know was that Detective Sarah Chen had been watching from the hotel balcony above, her phone already dialing 911 in 20 seconds. Karen's life of privilege and entitlement would shatter like glass, and the mother she'd just tried to destroy would become the architect of her. The Grandview Resort sparkled under the Florida sun like a jewel against the azure sky. Sarah Chen adjusted her daughter's sun hat with practiced ease, checking the straps on Mia's specialized flotation device one more time. At 7 years old, Mia had been paralyzed from the waist down since birth, but her infectious laughter and determined spirit made her the brightest light in any room. "Mama, look." Mia pointed excitedly toward the pool where a group of children played Marco Polo. "Can I swim with them?" Sarah's heart clenched with a familiar mixture of pride and protective instinct. This vacation was supposed to be their fresh start, the first real break since the divorce, since the custody battle, since David had walked out claiming he couldn't handle having a disabled daughter. Sarah had saved every penny for 6 months to afford this week at the resort. "Of course, sweetheart. Let me get your chair positioned by the pool." The adaptive wheelchair was a marvel of engineering, lightweight titanium that could transition from land to water activities. Sarah had researched every detail, every safety feature, every possible scenario. As a detective with the Miami PD, she planned for contingents. It was how she'd survived 15 years on the force and how she protected her daughter in a world that wasn't always kind to children with disabilities. The pool area was crowded but not chaotic. Families lounged on designer deck chairs while children splashed in the crystal-clear water. Sarah found a spot near the shallow end where Mia could easily interact with other kids while staying safe. She locked the wheelchairs, brakes, and began the careful process of transferring Mia into the water. "Need any help?" A kind voice interrupted her concentration. Sarah looked up to see a woman in her 60s with silver hair and worried eyes. She wore a resort staff badge that read Helen Guest Services. "Thank you, but we've got this down to a science," Sarah replied with a smile. "Mia's been swimming since she was 3. Helen's face lit up. "How wonderful! I have a grandson with cerebral palsy. It's amazing what these kids can do when given the chance." As Sarah lowered Mia into the pool, her daughter immediately began her modified backstroke, her arms cutting through the water with surprising grace. The other children, initially curious about the wheelchair, quickly accepted Mia into their games once they saw her swimming skills. "She's incredible," Helen said softly. "You've done an amazing job." Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the mix of pride and exhaustion that came with single motherhood. "She's the incredible one. I just try to keep up." For the next hour, Sarah watched Mia play with unprecedented joy. A group of children had spontaneously organized swimming races, and Mia was holding her own against kids twice her size. Sarah allowed herself to relax for the first time in months, actually considering ordering a drink from the poolside bar. That's when Karen Blackwood arrived. She swept onto the pool deck like she owned it, which, given her net worth, she practically did. Platinum blonde hair, perfectly styled despite the humidity, designer swimsuit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no in her 53 years of life. Karen's eyes immediately locked onto Mia's wheelchair parked beside Sarah's chair, her perfectly sculpted features twisted into an expression of distaste. "Excuse me," Karen's voice cut through the ambient chatter like a blade. She marched directly toward Sarah, her heels clicking against the wet deck. "Are you responsible for that equipment?" Sarah looked up from her book, instantly alert. Years of police work had taught her to recognize trouble, and Karen Blackwood radiated it like heat from asphalt. "I'm sorry, is there a problem? That wheelchair is blocking the premium poolside area?" Karen's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. "My family has reserved this section for the entire afternoon." Sarah glanced around the spacious pool deck. There were at least a dozen empty lounge chairs, and Mia's wheelchair was positioned well away from the main traffic flow. She kept her voice level, professional. "I don't see any reserved signs, and we're not blocking anything. My daughter is playing with the other children. Karen's eyes narrowed. Your daughter shouldn't be in the pool with normal children. It's a safety hazard, and frankly, it's disturbing the other guests. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Around them, conversations began to quiet as other guests sensed the brewing conflict. Sarah rose slowly from her chair, her 5'6" frame suddenly seeming much taller. I'm sorry, what did you just say about my daughter? I said she doesn't belong here. Karen's voice rose, emboldened by what she perceived as Sarah's uncertainty. This is a family resort for normal families. Nobody wants to see ... While they're trying to relax, in the pool, Mia had stopped swimming. Her large brown eyes were fixed on the confrontation, and Sarah could see the confusion and hurt beginning to creep across her daughter's face. The other children had stopped playing too, floating in uncomfortable silence. My daughter has every right to be here, Sarah said quietly, her detective training keeping her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. She's a child enjoying a vacation. She's a liability, Karen snapped. What if she has some kind of episode? What if she contaminates the water? I've paid good money for this vacation, and I won't have it ruined by your selfish need to parade your problems in public. The pool deck had gone completely silent now. Sarah was aware of dozens of eyes watching, waiting to see how this would play out. Helen, the resort employee, was hurrying over with a manager in tow. Ma'am, there seems to be some kind of misunderstanding, the manager began diplomatically. The misunderstanding, Karen cut him off, is that you've allowed this person to bring her defective child into your pool. I want them removed immediately, or I'll be speaking to your corporate office about discrimination against paying customers. The word defective hung in the air like poison. Sarah felt something fundamental shift inside her chest, feeling she'd had 15 years ago when she'd first put on a badge and sworn to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Mamma Mia's small voice carried across the water. What's the mean lady saying? Sarah looked at her daughter, treading water with the strength and grace of a natural athlete, surrounded by new friends who had accepted her without question. Then she looked at Karen Blackwood, a woman who had probably never faced a real challenge in her life, who thought money and attitude could reshape reality to her preferences. The mean lady is about to learn something about the real world, Sarah said softly. Karen's face flushed with triumph. Finally, get that thing out of my pool. I'm not going anywhere, Sarah replied, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had arrested murderers and faced down armed suspects. And if you refer to my daughter as that thing again, you're going to discover what happens when you threaten the wrong person's child. Are you threatening me? Karen's voice pitched higher, the way bullies' voices always did when they encountered actual resistance. Do you know who I am? Do you know what I can do to you? I know exactly what you are, Sarah said, pulling out her phone, and I know exactly what you can't do to me. She speed-dialed a number while maintaining eye contact with Karen. Call connected after one ring. Detective Chen, she said into the phone. I need to report a hate crime in progress at the Grandview Resort. Adult female making threats against a disabled child. I'm requesting immediate backup. Karen's face went white. You can't. You're not. ... That's not a real crime. Harassment, intimidation, and threatening behavior toward a disabled person absolutely is a real crime, Sarah replied calmly. And making those threats in front of witnesses, that's what we call evidence. Around the pool, other guests were now pulling out their phones, recording the confrontation. The manager was speaking rapidly into his radio, calling for security. Helen was helping Mia out of the pool, wrapping her in a towel and speaking to her in soothing tones. You don't understand, Karen said, her voice taking on a panicked edge. I'm Karen Blackwood. My husband is I don't care if your husband is the president, Sarah cut her off. What I care about is that you just threatened my daughter in front of 50 witnesses, and in about 3 minutes, you're going to be explaining your behavior to the Broward County Sheriff's Department. Karen looked around wildly, seeming to realize for the first time that the crowd had turned against her. The other guests were looking at her with disgust and disbelief. A few were openly filming, their phones trained on her face. This is ridiculous, Karen sputtered. I'm a victim here. I'm being harassed by this person who shouldn't even be allowed in public. Ma'am, the resort manager said firmly, I'm going to have tea. The ambulance bay at Broward General Hospital. Her designer swimsuit now stained with blood and chlorinated water. Sarah Chen sat in the passenger seat of Officer Martinez's patrol car. "You sure you don't want to press charges for the threats?" Sarah's phone buzzed with another text message. In the 2 hours since the pool incident, the video footage had exploded across social media. #Pulkerin was trending nationwide, and the resort's guest services had fielded over 300 calls from reporters. "I want every charge that will stick," Sarah said firmly. "Destruction of property, harassment, public disturbance, and if there's anything else you can think of, add it to the list." Channel 7 News. "We'd like to—" Sarah hung up immediately and turned to Martinez. "How did they get my number?" "Same way they got the story. Someone at the resort probably leaked the police report. Karen Blackwood is about to become the most hated woman in America." Through the hospital's glass doors, Sarah could see a familiar figure approaching Helen, the kind resort employee who had befriended Mia at the pool. She was carrying a large gift bag and wearing an expression of determined purpose. "Excuse me," Helen called out as she reached the patrol car. "Detective Chen, I wanted to check on your daughter." Sarah rolled down the window. "She's fine, thank you. A little shaken up, but she's a tough kid." And, double quotes, she paused, her eyes filling with tears. "I hope you'll consider staying for the rest of your vacation." "That's very generous. But please," Helen interrupted. Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from her captain back in Miami, Sarah, seeing the news reports. "Take all the time you need. The department's got your back." "Where is she now?" Sarah asked Martinez. "Karen Blackwood. She tried to hurt your kid and ended up nearly killing herself." Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions. As a mother, she wanted Karen to face consequences for her cruelty. As a human being, she couldn't quite celebrate another person's suffering, no matter how richly deserved, as anyone contacted her family. "That's the interesting part," Martinez said, pulling out his phone. "We tried calling the husband. She kept mentioning he's been living in a hotel while she's been staying at the family mansion, apparently having some kind of breakdown." Helen gasped. "She's been lying about everything." "Gets better," Martinez continued. "Her credit cards are maxed out, the house is in foreclosure, and she's been paying for this vacation with borrowed money. He's been trying to get a restraining order against her for harassment." Sarah stared at the hospital entrance, processing this information. The entitled, wealthy woman who had terrorized her daughter was actually a fantasy that just became a nightmare, Martinez replied. "Even if she recovers fully, she's looking at criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and public humiliation that'll follow her for the rest of her life." Sarah's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed her daughter's name. Mia was calling. From Helen's phone back at the resort, Mama Mia's voice was small but steady. Sarah closed her eyes, overwhelmed by her daughter's capacity for compassion. Even after being called defective and having her wheelchair destroyed, "I don't know yet, baby, but that's not your concern. Are you having fun with Helen? She showed me the new wheelchair they're bringing. It's even better than my old one." And Mama Mia's voice brightened. "All the kids from the pool came to check on me. They want to have a swimming party tomorrow," while Karen Blackwood lay unconscious in a hospital bed. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. I'll be there in 20 minutes. After ending the call, Sarah sat in silence for a moment, watching the controlled chaos of the hospital entrance. Somewhere in that building, Karen Blackwood was fighting for her life, the victim of her own toxic worldview. Martinez asked. She could have just walked away, could have ignored us, enjoyed her vacation, gone home to whatever problems she was running from. Instead, she chose to attack a child, and now her life is over. Martinez nodded grimly. "I've seen it before. People who think the world owes them something, that their problems are always someone else's fault." Opened it. The video of Karen's meltdown had been shared over 50,000 times in just 2 hours. The comments were brutal. "This is what happens when privilege meets reality. Feel sorry for that beautiful little girl. What a monster. Hope she never wakes up. The world's better without people like this." Sarah closed the app quickly. The court of public opinion had already convicted Karen Blackwood, and the sentence was social death. Detective Chen, the new voice, interrupted her thoughts. "I understand you're the officer involved in the incident with Ms. Blackwood." "I'm the victim's mother," Sarah corrected. "What's her condition?" Dr. Reeves glanced around nervously. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but ... she's awake. She's been conscious for about 20 minutes, and your name is the only thing she said clearly. She seems ... different, confused, maybe even remorseful." The doctor paused. Martinez leaned forward. "Is she coherent enough to be questioned?" "Medically, yes, but I'd recommend keeping it brief." Sarah stared at the hospital entrance, torn between curiosity and revulsion. What could Karen Blackwood possibly want to say to her now? "I'll give you 5 minutes," she told Martinez, "but I want it recorded." Was dimly lit and filled with the steady beeping of medical equipment. Karen Blackwood lay propped up in bed, her platinum hair matted and her face pale without makeup. She looked smaller somehow, Martinez beside her with his recording device visible for being a monster. "Why?" Sarah asked bluntly. "Why did you do it?" Karen closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Because I was angry. At everyone. At life. Richard left me, took the kids, the house is gone, and I just ... I wanted someone else to hurt as much as I was hurting. So you chose to attack. A 7-year-old girl in a wheelchair. Your daughter was so happy, and I was so miserable, and I couldn't stand it. I wanted to take that happiness away from her." She opened her eyes, meeting Sarah's gaze. "How sick is that? What kind of person thinks that way?" Sarah felt a chill. This wasn't the ranting of the entitled woman from the pool. This was something deeper, more disturbing. The honest confession of someone who had deliberately chosen cruelty. "A person who needs help," Sarah said carefully. "Professional help. It's too late for that now. You didn't try to drown her," Martinez interjected. "You destroyed her wheelchair. Same thing, isn't it?" Karen's voice was hollow. "Taking away someone."